Okay, so this is the third time I filmed this over the last couple weeks, and for varying reasons didn't like the video, so here we are, third time's the charm. Welcome back to my channel. I'm JJ the Bearded Bookworm, and today we're going to be talking about Elantris, Brandon Sanderson's first published works. So if you look online, if you're trying to get into the Cosmere and you're trying to look at what order or where you should start, a lot of times what you'll see is they do not recommend starting with the Stormlight Archive. That is Sanderson's big epic fantasy. Each book is, 1,200 pages plus. And it is his magnum opus. That is the big kind of culminating series that kind of all the other series, while they stand alone, all start to tie into that big series. It's a lot, and if you're not prepared for that level of commitment, that is why a lot of people suggest not starting there. The other place people will tell you to not start is with Elantris. That's because it is Brandon's first published work, so it is largely regarded as kind of the roughest of them all. What I definitely recommend you not doing is start with the Stormlight Archive like I did, and then go directly to Elantris, which I also did. That gets real rough. Like I said, Stormlight Archive is his magnum opus. It is the culmination of all of his epic fantasy, and Elantris, while still very good, like I said, and I'll agree with a lot of the criticism, it's pretty rough. Elantris follows three main characters, and it's actually set up in what is called a triad kind of setup, meaning we start with the first character, Raoden. The next chapter is from the viewpoint of Serene, and the third one is following Rathen, and then the next one loops back to Raoden and follows that order through pretty much the entire book. So Raoden is the heir to the throne. He is the prince of Erelon, and he wakes up one day to find out he is a Elantrian. Now, Elantris used to be this big, magnificent city where the gods resided. The Shade would come around to people randomly, give them this power, and transform them into an Elantrian. However, 10 years before our story takes place, a catastrophic event happens, Elantris falls, and now instead of becoming these godlike creatures with incredible powers, you become these zombie, immortal beings that just slowly devolve into madness. So our story picks up with Raoden becoming not the big, powerful, godlike creatures, but one of these zombie-esque rotting corpse type people. I should say, Elantrians, regardless of the type, they're not the zombie Elantrians don't actually rot. They just kind of stay in a constant state of living-ish. So our second viewpoint is from that of Serene. Serene, I don't know. Nobody really knows. Brandon Sanderson himself sometimes says it differently than how everybody else commonly says it, or how the proper way how some characters say. So we're gonna go with Serene. I'll probably switch between Serene and Serene. I don't know, but anyway, Serene is Raoden's betrothed. There's a political marriage between the two of them, and she arrives in Erelon to find out her betrothed is dead. Now, because of the wedding contract and it being a political marriage, she is now considered, for all intents and purposes, married and now widowed. And so she has to go through, and she is now living in this land that she is unfamiliar with people she's unfamiliar with, and trying to navigate the political landscape of this town. The king is kind of a tyrant, and really puts a lot of economic pressure on all of the nobles. So it follows her, and her story is largely a political intrigue, kind of navigating court and whatnot, and by and large was my least favorite storyline, to be honest. Our third viewpoint is that of Rathen. Rathen is a high priest from the Fordell Empire. Fordell is kind of a religious empire that, by bringing everybody under this one worship, they're basically glorifying God in that way, and very strict. Rathen was his storyline was a very slow burn, where in the beginning I was very dreading having to read his chapters just because it was really boring. Part of his personality is just this very logical, dispassionate person, and although the political parts of him, where he was trying to figure out how to navigate how to convert Erelon by the deadline that he was given by the Empire, those things specifically were interesting. However, he himself was just a very meh character for most of it. He slowly got better and better as he starts to face adversity and really starts to question his beliefs and why he believes what he believes. And as that went on, it got more and more and more interesting, and he actually became my favorite character in this story. So here's the things that I liked. The political intrigue for each character. There was political philosophy sprinkled throughout each character's storyline, depending on what they were dealing with and what their goals were. Raiden's trying to figure out how to navigate being in Elantris now, and how to create a living, or trying to figure out how to make conditions livable for these zombie magic leper kind of characters that, they just kind of, they're constantly hungry. They're any type of pain that you feel enters and never goes away. So as soon as you're hungry forever. You stub your toe, that feeling of stubbing your toe stays with you forever. So just slowly, people of Elantris are slowly, basically the pain slowly devolves their psyche. They slowly start to give into their pain and eventually become what's called a hoed. Basically just a lay in the street moaning about, hunger or whatever, and basically just slowly devolve. Serene, like I said, I'm going to mispronounce her name like crazy. Her storyline follows her trying to navigate court and how to basically end up overthrowing this tyrant of a ruler. Serene ends up talking about how instead of making slave-like people of the servants, why not give them almost like an employee share plan, where they say, here's your little plot, you get 10% of the profits that you make and whatnot. And so coming from that perspective was really interesting. And then really the only political type intrigue from Rathen was how we went navigating a convert a nation, bring them all over to one ideology, and how to navigate that in such a short amount of time. So the things I didn't like, that triad system really constrained the story, where I was constantly, Raiden's story would pick up, and then I'd go to Serene, and then I would have to dread getting through Rathen's chapters for the most part. One character storyline would get really interesting, and then I'd have to wait 2 chapters to get back to them. And while that was good and eventually, chapters just became super short to help with the pacing, but it really did kind of constrain. I, dread. It was, for whatever reason, I had a really hard time getting through this book. Another thing is This story had a very Deus Ex Machina kind of situation near the end, where it kind of just, because that's what the story has to have. Here's now things are happening now because we're at the end of the story and the drama is starting to build. Another thing that I didn't like was some of these like loose ends that tend to happen at near the end of a story. They kind of just spend a little bit, sentence or two, or like, oh, here's why this happened. Here's why this happened, rather than kind of showing or explaining what was happening while it was happening. It just kind of, oh, yeah, here's why that happened. Here's why that makes sense. And if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. Specific minor characters where you're just like, wait, what? Overall, Elantris was a really enjoyable story, especially near the end. Once things started popping off, I was in for the ride. I went from reading like 30-ish pages a day to like, I read the last 200 pages in like a day and a half. I'd say this is like a solid like mid-tier book. I don't really like reading books like just because, like, just to explain what I like, don't like, and let you make the decision about that. Definitely agree with, if you're just starting to get into wanting to read Sanderson's books, don't read Elantris. Definitely loop back around. Maybe make it like your second or third series or books that you get into. I also read Hope of Elantris, which is like a short story of the events that were happening elsewhere in the climax, kind of like a deleted scene from the from Elantris, as well as The Emperor's Soul, which is a novella that takes place on a different continent in the same world. And kind of what my plan is talk about these main books, and then when I'm talking about the short stories or novellas that tie in, we'll kind of talk about Cosmere-esque things and how they all kind of tie in together loosely. Alright, question of the day. If you've read Elantris, who's your favorite character in the book? Mine is Galadon. Once again, can't pronounce names. Galadon's this like super grumpy dude who comes from a people that are supposed to be super chill, but this one's super grumpy, and he's kind of like the sidekick to one of the main characters. And just his kind of interaction where he's like, I don't understand what you're just... His grumpiness overall just really helps. It's constantly calling people friends and whatnot. That's all I have for today. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, do all those YouTube-y things. I'm JJ. I'm the Bearded Bookworm, and I'll see you in a couple days.